Good evening. The Taoiseach Enda Kenny says he's confident the fallout between the DUP and Sinn Féin over welfare reform can be resolved before the Westminster election. He met the First and Deputy First Ministers today and said his government will continue to support the parties in getting over what he described as this bump in the road. However, Mr Kenny also hit out at Sinn Féin's economic strategy in the Republic, claiming the party doesn't want to be in government. And he says Fine Gael won't, under any circumstances, form a coalition with Sinn Féin. When I met him earlier this evening, I began by asking him about the ongoing standoff on welfare between the two big parties here.
Well, it's not for me to discuss the detail of that. Obviously, that's a matter for the executive here. But I do expect that in accepting their responsibilities, they can deal with this. I describe this as if you like, a bump in the road or an obstacle on the way forward, and I hope that it can be resolved, and I expect it will be.
Senator Gary Hart, who's also in town today, said he believes the issues could be resolved in a matter of weeks before the UK general election. Do you think he's got that about right?
Well, I would hope that would be the case. Obviously, this was a matter that was agreed before Christmas and was signed off on. And then, for different reasons, a question of a difference of opinion arose, and I hope that can be put together. There are a few weeks left before the British election, so I hope that can actually happen and have it finalised.
OK, you believe that it can be put back together again. What is the role of the Irish government in encouraging that or in helping that to actually happen? I mean, is it proactive?
It is. The Irish government is a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. The Irish government is a participant in encouraging and motivating and supporting where we can, along with the British government, the executive in putting together the Stormont Agreement. But the details of that are for the executive to actually implement themselves.
In terms of how we hit this bump in the road, as you describe it, I mean, according to Sinn Féin, it was issues over the agreement on welfare changes that caused the deadlock. Is that how you see it? Do you understand that to be the correct interpretation?
Well, the Irish government weren't involved in the detail of the figures here. But the fact of the matter is that the welfare reform programme was agreed and was signed off on. Okay, a difference of opinion arose on this matter, and that's the responsibility of the elected representatives and the executive here to put that back on the road to completion again, and I expect them to do that.
Are you prepared to share with me your interpretation of that? The DUP says it was very clear about the figures and the figures didn't change. Sinn Féin says the DUP reneged on its agreement as far as the figures are concerned.
I wasn't a party to the discussion or the detail of that, nor indeed was the Minister for Foreign Affairs from my government. We participated in Stormont as an encourager, as a supporter, as a motivator to move this process forward. And that's why Gary Hart was appointed by the American administration, and that's why I was glad to see the agreement signed off on before Christmas and accepted and welcomed. It's a case now of accepting that responsibility and moving on to implement it.
And what about Sinn Féin's position on austerity, north and south? Do you see a contradiction in that?
Well, I've pointed this out in the Dáil on many occasions. We've had a very difficult time in the south over the last number of years, inherited a catastrophic economic situation, blocked out of the markets, interest rates 15%, unemployment 15.2%, neither name nor credibility. We've had to impose very serious challenges to our people, reductions in public salaries, freezing of public recruitment, and so many other difficult areas. But because of those sacrifices, in a relatively short time, we've moved to a point now where we are in a very different position. And for me, as head of government, it's now to secure that recovery, so that people can feel the benefit of it right around the country, and that you don't allow it to roll back, because while the recovery is happening, it's still fragile, and you could undo all of that good by incompetence or mismanagement, or just assuming that everything is again rosy in the garden when it's not.
When you talk about incompetence, are you referring to Sinn Féin's economic policy? Because you've said in the past you don't think that Sinn Féin's economic worldview, if implemented, would be good for people in the Republic.
Well, it wouldn't, because Sinn Féin's economic policy for the 26 counties and for the Republic is based on false economics. It's based on changes in corporation tax, changes in income tax, changes in commercial rates, changes in bringing in a further wealth tax. which as a combination would drive investment and jobs out of the country.
You also said recently that the Irish economy is fragile. Now, while you may be saying that it's looking positive at the moment, and I know the IMF said just yesterday that the Irish economy is starting to fire on all cylinders, so that's quite positive. You're certainly not out of the woods.
Certainly not, nor have we ever pretended that we are. But I think the difference here is that in previous times, in the so-called Celtic Tiger years, when there was a veneer of endless wealth, that was based on one sector only, the construction sector, and that an assumption that the country could run on the taxes coming from that. Now the economy is growing right across the sectors, and the agri sector, the hospitality sector, the financial services sector, the pharma sector, all of these are now growing strongly. But the point is that debt is still high, it's reducing rapidly. We want it to continue in that way. So the government will continue to focus on employment and getting more people back to work, and on ensuring that our economy does not slip backwards.
Are you concerned, honestly, at the prospect of greater competition from Northern Ireland in potentially the very near future if the devolution of corporation tax here goes ahead?
No, I'm not. I've welcomed this on many occasions. It's a case, and I understand that the matter has concluded at British government level today, and that's very welcome. It's a question now for the executive to decide in due course at what level it wants to pitch its corporation tax. The lower it goes, the more you lose in terms of what you have to provide as an alternative.
But it makes this economy more competitive as far as the Republic is concerned. That's potentially bad news for you, isn't it?
It's not bad news, because this is an island economy, and we have to look beyond the mere borders of the 26 or the borders of Ulster here. We're all interdependent and interconnected globally. And that's why I welcomed the fact that we put together a tripartite trade mission to Singapore from the British government, Northern Ireland, and from the Republic. And we need more of that, because we are an English-speaking island. We have been a landing point to Europe on many occasions over the last 40 years. And just as a matter of interest, in fairness to the First and Deputy First Minister here, even with a higher rate of corporation tax, they brought about significant foreign direct investment into Northern Ireland. And I point out to you that US investment in Europe last year declined by 19%. It rose by 42% in the Republic, which is extraordinary.
Is all of that at least partly why you're so concerned about the possibility, apparently, of the UK possibly leaving the European Union? You do seem to be exercised by that prospect.
I am exercised by it, because it has very serious consequences, and we've been very clear on this as a government which I lead. I don't want to see Britain leave the European Union. The Prime Minister doesn't want to leave the European Union. The European Council doesn't want Britain to leave the European Union. This would be bad for Britain, would be bad for Northern Ireland, and would be bad for the Republic. On the other hand, staying in maintains the potential of prosperity and future progress. So we've had a good discussion with the First and Deputy First Minister about this. Clearly the election takes place in Britain on the 7th of May, but I think we need to think about the consequences of this for the future. So that's why I'm concerned about it.
You've got an election yourself, of course, either later this year or next year. The latest Irish Times opinion poll, which was published today, has Fine Gael level with Sinn Féin at 24%. How do you account for the continuing strength of Sinn Féin's rating, despite the recent controversies that the party's been involved in?
Well, you're a long way from a general election in down south yet. It's easy to be populist and say that you can have everything provided for nothing. It's a very different story when you're in government and have to make decisions. Politics for me is always about people. Government is about making decisions. And the mandate given to me as head of government was to fix our public finances and put our country back to work. To be at the opinion polls for what they're worth, and I have no great credence in opinion polls anyway, is encouraging, given the scale of the challenges and decisions that the government of Fine Gael and Labour have had to make in the last 4 years.
Gerry Adams made it crystal clear at his recent Ardèche in Derry that Sinn Féin will not prop up either a Fine Gael or a Fianna Fáil-led government. What do you take that to mean?
He doesn't want to be in government
at all.
It's much easier to be on the populist wing all the time and say I'm a party of negativity.
Of course, he says he'd be prepared to lead a government.
Well, I think that the people in the Republic will examine carefully the reality and the result of having faced difficult decisions and challenges, and the growth that is now rising throughout all the sectors of our economy down south. The opposition parties, of which Sinn Féin is one, have have a tax and spend philosophy. And we're not going back to the days of boom and bust. That's what wrecked our economy. That's what lost us 300,000 jobs. That's what caused a hemorrhage of emigration. I'm glad to say that I expect that 2016 will be a year when more people will come back to Ireland than leave it.
Well, in 2016, Gerry Adams could be the leader of a very powerful number of TDs in the Dáil. If that's the case, would Fine Gael consider under any circumstances forming a coalition with Sinn Féin?
No.
Absolutely not. You're ruling that out?
In no circumstances.
So you would rather be in opposition than be forced to sit in government with Sinn Féin?
I'm always an optimist, and the job given to me by the people in my mandate is one that I intend to fulfil. And when they're given the opportunity to cast their verdict on the government, the choice will be between political stability, more progress of the kind we're now seeing, or the handing over the country and the economy to either those who wrecked it or those who would wreck it.
Okay, just briefly, we're coming to the end of the interview, Taoiseach. Let me ask you why you chose to meet members of the Kingsmills and Ballymurphy families on this two-day visit.
Well, I met the Kingsmill people, including Alan Black, the sole survivor of that massacre, a number of years ago, and I said I'd come back to Bestbrook when I had the chance to do so, and I came back today, and I met the community in their own location. As you're aware, there is a coroner's inquest ongoing here. There's been a great deal of development and discussion between the PSNI and the Gardaí. And we're now at a point where we've reached a process whereby the files that are available to the Gardaí and the Republic will be made available to the coroner, either in Belfast or, if it's not legally possible to do so, in Dublin, for him to have that information provided to deal with his inquest. The reason I wanted to meet the Kingsmill people is that nobody has been brought to justice arising from those killings, which happened 39 years ago. Tomorrow I'm going to meet the Ballymurphy people, who have equally strong grievances that justice was not done for their loved ones. These are parts of the legacy of the past that we have to deal with, and it's time to move on and deal with these things so the truth can out and that those who are responsible can be brought to justice.
And just to be clear tonight, you are saying if there are circumstances where the Irish government can provide critical information or can help to provide critical information to find out who was responsible for various atrocities in the Troubles, that is a clear commitment that you are making as Taoiseach. That
Yes.
will happen.
Yes, and the Gardaí already have been in contact with the coroner. The information that is available to the Gardaí is in 2 batches, and the first of those will be supplied in the next matter of weeks, and the second beyond that. There are legal complications here. We're dealing with 2 different jurisdictions. And if it's not legally possible to have the information transferred to Belfast, then it's going to be possible for the coroner to have access to the information in Dublin.
Okay, one final question. You have another referendum in the Republic on May the 22nd on equal marriage in your jurisdiction. If people vote for change in the Republic, there will be equal marriage in Great Britain and in the Republic, and the only place not to allow it in these islands will be Northern Ireland. How do you feel about that prospect?
Well, I don't presume to know the result of the referendum on the 22nd of May in the South.
But you're supporting change?
Of supporting change very strongly, and the point is that all of the parties in the Dáil support this. The point is that we've evolved as a society to be one of compassion, of tolerance, of integrity and of fairness.
And can you see how the Catholic Church and indeed members of various Protestant traditions in Northern Ireland could have huge problems with that?
Well, referenda are always a matter for the people. This is a case of hearing the stories of ordinary people who are gay or lesbian, who wish to be married. We've had civil registration and civil union, and the next stage is to move on to allowance for civil marriage.
And would you hope that Northern Ireland might at some stage in the not too distant future follow on?
It's a matter for the executive and for the people in Northern Ireland. As far as we're concerned, we've had discussions about this at the Constitutional Convention, and the parties themselves have discussed it, the government have discussed it. We've put the question in situ in the law, and that question will be answered by the people on the 22nd of May.